When life throws you a curveball, how are you going to handle adversity? Welcome to the Fearless Mindset Podcast, where you're about to go on a journey as I interview security, business, and entertainment leaders on what it takes to stay fearless. I'm your host, Mark Ludlow, and enjoy today's episode. Hello, everybody. This is Mark Ludlow, and my guest today is James Hamilton. He served with the FBI, with a career at the Sheriff's Department, and he became very well known, sought after in setting up different teams, and went from the FBI. And we all know, if we're in the security industry, we all know who Gavin DeBecker is, and they are the icon in the security protective industry. And pleasure to have you on, James, and feel free to start the show, and you're a guest, and the floor is yours, and feel free to share your story.
Great. Well, thanks a lot for having me, and for all those listening, thanks for tuning in. Gavin always says that time is a valuable resource for everybody, and you're going to give up some of your time to listen to us, and I thank you for that because you'll never get it back. I started in this world, in police work in '92, and I was just a road deputy, and kind of always wanted to go federal. So after 5 years, I was lucky enough to get hired by the FBI as a special agent. I did a lot of work with them, about 18 years. I really got heavily involved in the tactical world. I was a SWAT operator, and it was on, the Joint Terrorism Task Force as a, case agent. But I really got involved in close protection because that's how the Bureau FBI does it, is they use SWAT teams to do close protection. So I got involved in that kind of very minorly, or on the periphery, if you will. There's only really two protective details in the FBI. It's the Attorney General of the United States, or it's the FBI director. So I put in a resume, if you will, to be selected for that team of the director of the FBI. And I was selected in '04, and I started working with a full-time team, and I did that for about 4 years. Loved every single second of it. It was the greatest job I had in the FBI. Without a doubt. Those were the finest agents I ever worked with. And I was with Director Mueller, and he was just fantastic. And then I went down to Quantico as a trainer, as a tactical instructor for new agents, and then kind of dovetailed into that. We didn't really have a standalone protection school. So I did that. I created it with a lot of help from people who had gone before me, but made it a 10-day school. And we were lucky enough to have agents from, NSA, CIA. So how did I get into this whole private sector deal was, we had been giving out this book called The Gift of Fear to agents, and a guy named Gavin DeBecker had written it. For those that haven't read that book, I highly recommend it. But what really stood out to me was when I read it, like, I really felt like those were my thoughts. Like I'd said those things to my wife or my mother or others. And the more I read, the more I was kind of drawn into this guy. And I had no idea anything about him. Thought he was like some Navy SEAL super assassin or something. I didn't know. He's just, he's just a really humble guy but he spoke truth, and truth that really resonated with me. So then I heard there was more books, and I read more, and there was this book called Just 2 Seconds. Now that was different because I had been doing close protection, and I had never read Just 2 Seconds, right? I had no idea. I mean, I kind of think I understood moment of commitment, moment of recognition, but it had never been explained to me in those terms like that book does. And for your listeners, if no one's ever read that book, what that is a study of over 1,400 attacks on personnel or protected people. And what Gavin and the authors, Tom Taylor, Jeff Marquardt, came up with was that there's about 2 seconds between the moment of commitment, when the assailant commits to the act. Usually that's when the gun's drawn or a knife. And then the moment of recognition. That's when the protected person or the protectors, the bodyguards, get their head around what's happening. About 2 seconds. It's an average. And there were some real interesting concepts in that book to me. And what I did as I read it is I was like, there's some drills in here. And I started using them in the FBI school to train agents because I didn't know anything about this stuff. And it was very, very helpful. I mean, what it does is it gives you a real healthy respect for time and distance. And really what it comes down to, as you know from studying attacks, is that usually protectors are out of position and they can't respond fast enough because the distance is too great. That's just the reality of studying attacks. Anyway, back to Gavin. I'm running these schools. He reaches out. He's like, "Hey, are you using Just 2 Seconds in FBI training?" I'm like, "Yes, sir." And we started talking.
Wow.
And the talking led to an offer of employment, which I took. And I've been with them for 5 years. I started out as a director of protection strategies. And then I got promoted into my role now, which is I'm a senior vice president, and I do what's called quality and protection. And really what that means is me and my team, my division, we ensure that the 650 protectors that work for us are licensed, trained, and equipped properly, legally, and they're a quality product to which we have told the client we were going to provide them. Well, I make sure that we do that very thing. What I think is really successful,
Hmm.
even right now in 2020 with COVID and everything going on, I would just tell people listening, you know, really focus on the basics. There's a lot of cool schools out there, and close protection is one of the most kind of um, unorganized,
Right. So
things.
true.
And right, there's so many. Anyone can say they're a close protection specialist.
You go
Okay.
through academy for 5 days and you have that certificate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you can hang a LinkedIn banner right now says you're a certified protection specialist or close protection or executive protection or whatever, because there's really no such school
Hmm.
to signs off on that, right? And no one can really say you're not anyway. So what I tell people all the time is like, first of all, where are you wanting to work? And if it's America, close
Hmm.
protection, CEO type work, well, really focus on, how do I get into that world? And go to a school that maybe, has either an ability to place you into that world,
Hmm.
or more importantly, they have a successful history of actually doing that said thing. And really, kind of you know, guide your training and your money that you're spending on that, on getting a position there. And what I mean by that specifically is, I wouldn't spend a lot of money and go to a 5-day shooting school if you think that's going to help you get into civilian American EP work. It very well may help you get into
Hmm.
protection work overseas, but not here in the US protecting a CEO. I would tell you to learn things more important like medical, how to talk to people, interpersonal skills, taking care of yourself physically, spending the money on nice clothes and nice pair of shoes with a shine on them because, CEOs, they know the difference.
They do.
You know, like really invest in you. Medical is the biggest thing. I mean, I, 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 I just can't beat this over the head enough. But we have 650 some odd bodyguards, and we routinely go into our medical bags. 60 times a quarter. We're in our medical bags, rendering medical aid, and we're rarely drawing weapons. Rarely,
True. Very true.
and so just be realistic with regards to what it is you're doing and what it is you're perfecting.
How many days in your academy do you focus on the medical part? I mean, what level of medical is it? It's just CPR? It's got to be more than CPR. Can you elaborate on that type of your in the academy?
Yeah, it's a complete full day. I can't give you the hours because I think
Yeah.
it's like 12, but obviously you'll get certified in, American Heart, first aid, CPR, AED for adults and infants. And then we do quarterly medical requals for all protectors. So each quarter, even after they've gone through the training, and let me back up. They also are getting TCCC, trauma casualty care. They're getting how to do tourniquets. They're getting, gunshot. They're getting all of those, big trauma type things, but they're really focusing on just an assessment of the normal stuff we see: sprains, falls, allergic reactions, those types of, kind of daily stuff that we're dealing with from, clients to vendors to, but then we have a great internal program where quarterly, the protectors have to do requals, which is fantastic. And I'll just tell you in your listeners, that's far more than we did in the FBI from the medical standpoint.
Wow,
Far,
impressive.
yeah, far more.
You made a good point, James. Is the point is a lot of people get stuck in spending money on schools that are really not applicable to the EP position. Shooting, shooting, shooting. Like you said, how many cases do you actually pull your gun out and shoot somebody?
Right.
One,
Right.
2%.
Well, if you read Just 2 Seconds and you study the research in America, just for your listeners, in America, we've never, and if anyone's familiar with it, let me know. But we're not familiar with any incident where a close protection person in America preemptively stopped an attack by using their firearm.
That's
Uh,
right.
it's not happened. There's been a lot of shooting afterwards, And that maybe was okay. Sometimes people got shot that shouldn't have got shot. Malcolm X comes to mind, kind of very quickly. I remember that one. They shot the wrong people. There's a lot of gunplay afterwards, but that's after the protectee's already been hit, and therefore it's really a failure with regards to the mission. And also from a civilian standpoint, there's a lot of states you can't carry a weapon, right? And so if you have always practiced, that's your response, well, I'm going to tell you, it's going to be a tough day for you when you're, working in a city where you don't have legal authority to have a firearm
Mm.
and you got to do an EP because the principal's gone there. Well, if that's your whole, that's your whole identity is a firearms response. When they take it away from you, I call it the hammer doctrine. What if your problem's not a nail? What if it's something else? If the
De-escalation,
tool,
verbal judo, get out of the situation.
yeah, yeah. I mean, jeepers. That's the biggest thing I see with regards to training our folks is just get them to understand the beauty of evacuation, the beauty of cover and evac. That is the answer, right? Yeah, get off the X, remove the principle from the environment usually calms everything down. If
Afterwards.
you get what I call drawn out or pulled out into the crowd, it could be a bad day for you and the principal because remember there may be more than you bargained for. In the book, we talk about projective and protective coverage. Projective coverage is when you go to the threat, and protective coverage is when you go to the principal. Well, if you can only do one, go to the principal.
Hmm.
You know, go to the principal because that 1-to-1 won't change. If you go out into the crowd, Malcolm X, then it's 1-to-3, 1-to-4, 1-to-5. You could get drawn out into something and you lose sight of the principal, and that's what you're being paid to do, which is protect the principal. So that's kind of the biggest thing for us is trying to retrain that brain to not want to mix it up and get in a fight, but to cover an evac, you know?
Yeah, when I was at Dan Carr's school in Omaha, Nebraska, Clark International, he spent most of the time just self defense, and we didn't even cover guns. I don't think we pulled it. He didn't have a pistol range or something like that. Wasn't available, but he spent 5 days advancing evacs, formations. He said, generally, you're in one or two. That's about it. Because companies do not want to pay that much money for an EP package. But
Yeah.
well, Gavin Becker, I'm sure you guys have different clients that have different needs.
We do, and it's so funny you said that because Dan Clark, for your listeners who don't know, you won't find a finer man out there. I know Dan, fantastic what he does. Why? And you think about why does his school teach that? Because he's actually done it.
Mm-hmm.
He's actually protected a guy. But that's what I like to see is I like to see EP training from people who've actually done EP. I mean, call me crazy.
Yeah, there's a lot of glamorization I see out there. There's some good schools. I'm not going to name names on the podcast because I want everybody to get along. But when I spent 5 days in his dojo on this mat, I got my butt kicked. I was tired. He saw me on Friday. He goes, "You look exhausted." I'm like, "Yeah, this is the best training I've had because everything is self defense connected and all mental classroom work, covering the basics of EP."
Yeah.
And I think everybody's so focused in on the John Wick weapons training and going to the targets and all that. But like you said, there's not any cases where an EP agent deploys that weapon system for self defense.
Yeah.
There,
I mean, and for your listeners, I mean, believe me, I'm sure there might be one or two, but no one likes guns more than me. I mean, I'm from the South. I'm from the South, for God's sakes. I mean, I love them, and I'd rather have a gun than not have a gun.
yeah,
I just know that that's probably not going to be my best option for most EP challenges that I face.
exactly.
I don't want to be over reliant on it. I study attacks for a living. I mean, every day I'm studying them, and I do not believe that bodyguards or protectors. I do not believe they wake up in the morning and they say, "Hey, I want to fail today." I
Mm,
don't believe that. I believe they're all out there trying to do their absolute best. Maybe they haven't been properly trained, maybe they're mentally not prepared, but I would say that I've never met anyone who meant to go out there and just do a bad job. So I think everyone listening needs to know that. I just think that what happens is it's always time and distance, and they always think, "Oh, I'm close enough." And then it happens, and they're like, "Oh, crap. I
right.
can't get there." You talk to most people where something bad's happened in an EP, they always say that. They're like, "Man, I couldn't get there fast enough. I saw it happen." And that's unfortunate because they probably weren't trained. Or you go back to the firearms response. If you just think about John Hinckley in 81, and you look at that crowd that he basically secreted himself into no Secret Service agent's going to fire into that crowd, right? That's why they didn't shoot. After the shooting, they weren't laying lead, right? They all jumped on top of him and they put him on the deck. Why? Because there's civilians everywhere. And if you start blasting into that crowd, your ass is going to prison, or you're definitely getting sued. Okay. And so that's what you see over and over and over again as a response to these assassinations is the bodies pile on top of the bad guy and they get him on the deck. There's not gunplay afterwards more, most of the time because there's that X factor. What I always say is, you're not deploying to the moon. There are going to be people around, right? There are people there. You can't just start blasting indiscriminately because you're responsible for every single round you fire. And so I just, I want people to be thinking about that when they're thinking about, okay, how I've trained or what I'm mentally preparing for.
It is what it is, paying the bills. And then you have the 1099 issue in California. You're supposed to be an employee of a PPO company that holds insurance and licensing. That's just the law. And you have a lot of guys out there, doing the Western style bodyguard thing, and they think it's okay to work under 1099, but they don't have the insurance. They think they have health insurance, but they need to have insurance because when that day comes, when they do pull that trigger, all of a sudden they have to go to court and they have a house. And can you elaborate on your thoughts on the insurance and liability and risk and all that?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, if you're operating without, a professional liability insurance policy, I would say, you need to check yourself, especially with not just our industry, but, like what's going on in 2020. I mean, you're seeing police officers being, charged criminally and civilly, you know, and they're police officers operating under like some authority. We really don't have any authority. We're private security professionals who are, we're really held to, just the civilian defense of life standard. That's it. We don't have any special powers. And you're going to be kind of, judged, if you will, I think, from a harsher light than a police officer because they do have some authority. So they can shoot a guy if it's a public safety argument, right? We don't have such luxury.
No.
If we're not defending our own life, right, or someone else, meaning the principal, dude, it's going to be a bad day for you. So yeah, I think you're kind of fooling yourself if you're not insured, especially if you have a firearm.
Mhm.
Golly.
And here's a question. Can you elaborate on the laws of California, especially when it comes to the castle doctrine in California? Because we have a lot of stuff going on in LA right now, protesting. People are freaking out right now. What can people do as a private citizen in their home legally?
Well, you have the right. If you are in imminent danger of death or serious bodily injury, you can defend your own life. You can't defend property, not with lethal force.
Okay.
But you can defend your own life if you feel as though that subject is a threat, imminent threat to you. And the California standard is what they call objectively reasonable. It used to be a reasonable belief. Now it's objectively reasonable, and people need to understand what that means. And that's you can't say, "Well, I thought maybe." You
Mm,
know, you have to say, "Well, that guy had a gun. That guy had a baseball bat, samurai sword, throwing star, and I was in fear for my life." And it's important people understand that because I think a lot of folks think, "Oh, well, I was in fear." Well, that's not gonna get it done, I don't think, unless, you can really articulate imminent danger of death or serious bodily injury. Just because someone's making you scared, I don't think you're there.
this is a question like if someone comes into your house and say they're not armed, they come in your house and can you take a shotgun and say, get out of my house? I think the California or LA district attorney's husband came out the door of the porch and I guess they had some protesters encroaching on their property and he had the gun. They get off the property. And I was like, okay, what are the laws with that?
Yeah, and remember that all of those things are always, opinions, meaning each incident is going to be looked at, I wouldn't say differently, but it's going to be looked at. And you may have one set of circumstances where the person is never charged, and then you have one set of circumstances, they seem very, very similar, and the person is charged.
Sure.
So there's no like, okay, no matter what you do, you're not going to get charged. That's just not true. When I talk to, right, like police officers or even protectors, like, why don't I get sued? I'm like, man, well, maybe get in another line of work because you're
Right.
probably going to. It's just the way it is in America in 2020. But yeah, if you're going out, like back to that district attorney thing, I thought he was walking out onto the porch. I think if you start going out into the yard, or
Right.
it's going to be hard to argue because they're going to say, well, you could have stayed in your house and waited for 911 to get there,
Good point.
you know,
Very good
and
point.
but again, it's always up to that jury. It's always up to, were you reasonable? Were you in fear for your life, and can you articulate that? And it's not for me to say, well, I don't think he should have shot. I wasn't there. I can tell you what the training says, or how we train agents and officers, but at the end of the day, I don't know. I wasn't there. And if someone says, hey, I was in fear for my life, well, okay, tell me how. But they got to be able to make that articulation.
That makes sense. Yeah. Going forward, just kind of your thoughts, your expert opinion on the current events taking place. How do people feel safe? What can they do with all the chaos going on and the anticipation of, we have the November 3rd election coming, and what can they do to feel safe in this climate?
Well, when you're talking about defunding police departments, and they're kind of different depending on where you look at how they're going to defund. But needless to say, if you're going to be cutting police officers and there's going to be less police officers on the street, well, people still feel as though they need to be protected. They want security. And then, so you've got that going on. And then you've got also what's going on is this eat the rich or against the rich kind of movement. Sometimes they're synonymous, sometimes they're different, but still they're both occurring kind of parallel to each other. Well, that's very concerning. So now you've got a reduction of police services to protect people, and you've got a group who wants to actually target the rich. Well, that makes those people very nervous. So I think for the private security industry, obviously it's going to grow. I don't know, I don't really have a crystal ball on that one,
Sure.
but I do believe that the anti-police sentiment is going to create situations where some officers will leave and maybe they'll find a home in the private security industry, right? Hopefully they'll come to, like us. We'd love to hire them. We'd love to hire them because we'd like to give them still that feeling of service. But, that's obviously a concern. And, I am a little bit interested in, you know, who is going to do those jobs? Who is going to enforce the law if we do defund police or we cut police? I read that, one city wants to have, enforcement officers who aren't law enforcement, pull cars over for traffic enforcement. I've done thousands of traffic stops and they were never easy. And they usually, got violent. Not all the time, but they did have that ability. And luckily I was trained, I thought, to deal with that. But I'd feel awful for a code enforcement officer who's maybe not trained or armed or equipped, to deal with something like that because, it's a very, very dangerous environment. So I don't know. I mean, hopefully cooler heads will prevail and things will calm down. But it is a very concerning time for us.
Yeah, I can see you're definitely concerned. I think it's nationwide about defunding the police because you have to have law enforcement because there's good and evil out there. We take the case of the rioting and the protest and all that. There's good and evil everywhere, and humanity, unfortunately. And eventually, this will pass, and the right things will happen,
Yeah.
and good will prevail. But yeah, thanks for your time, James. And yeah, you're an icon in the business, and yeah, your times. Thanks for your service in the FBI, and I'm sure those days of serving those attorney generals were very interesting politically, and all the threats and the things you had to go through. And the, I mean, sure, it's probably polar opposite experience going from FBI, private sector security is two different entities, like an apple and an orange. It's like that had to be a big adjustment for you.
Yeah, it's really, you're right. That was kind of the biggest thing for me. Well, there's a couple things. One is the lack of resources, the lack of manpower. I mean, in the government, we had a lot of people, a lot of agents we could pour at an assignment. And in the private sector, it's, somebody's got to pay for that. And I didn't ever think of it in those terms when I was with the government, because they weren't the taxpayers were paying, and we would just put as many agents as we need for certain detail. And in the private sector, the client's paying, so it's different, right? And then the other thing is that in the government, the person in that position, they didn't get a choice. Meaning, they had to have us. They had to have us as protection wherever they went. Whereas in the private sector, they do that all the time. They waive coverage. They're like, "Oh, I'm good. I'll see you later." Right? "I don't need you here. No, I don't want you to drive me," or "No, I don't want you to stay at the hotel," or whatever. They waive coverage a lot, right? No. Like they didn't get a choice. And I kind of felt bad for them actually, but that's what comes with the position is you've got this protective detail. So those are kind of two of the bigger things. And then a lot of folks that come to us, protectors from the military or law enforcement, they always want more training and more schools and all that, and that's great. But they have to remember that, this isn't the military. This isn't the government, right? Someone's got to pay for that,
Hmm.
right? That's not free.
Nothing's free.
Right. And I think they don't get it. I think it takes a while for them to really understand, hey, this is a business and we will invest in you. But man, it's not as easy as it was, where the government was just hitting you with training every month,
Right.
all the ammo you could shoot. It was fantastic.
It is disposable. There's no budget in the government. They just spend whatever dollars those are per month, per day, per week. You go to the private sector, you have a private family, they're paying that bill for training. And then probably the chief of staff goes, why do we need to spend $3,000 for the day?
Right.
Can you
And and
justify it in the invoice?
and for your people listening, I would just say that, I think I have so much respect for those solo operators out there because it's so much harder, right?
Hmm.
It's pretty easy to do a protective detail with 5 protectors. I mean, you do a walking formation, diamond up, and all that. Man, come on. But if you're a single operator like most of us are, it's really, really difficult. Because you're trying to keep the 540, which is, 360 covers laterally and then vertical 180. So 540 by yourself while you're trying to, phone advance where you're going. He's talking to you. It's really, really difficult. And my heart goes out to those solo operators out there because it is not easy. And then whenever they make a mistake, the very first thing the community wants to do is say, oh, he should have done this or she should have done that. Well, I just don't think it's right or fair.
A string quarterbacking.
No, I mean, we can all learn from mistakes,
Sure.
but, come on, man. I mean,
Gotta be
you know, the
forgiving.
right,
Have some
right.
grace.
I tell you, the one thing where we're killing ourselves, though, is confidentiality.
Right.
Uh, you're just not doing yourself any favors when you're making the news, your protectees' habits. And you can't go a week in this country without reading some news article.
Mm,
And it's just really we're not doing ourselves any favors as an industry by doing that and airing our dirty laundry. Because at the end of the day, the protectee protector relationship is based on trust. You
absolutely.
know, right? You can't really buy it. You got to earn it. And you definitely don't earn it by, blabbing your mouth about what you've seen and those types of things. I just, I mean, I can say that I was with Mueller because it's common knowledge and I
Sure.
didn't have, but man, I
Great
would never
point.
tell, I would never tell you, who GDBA, who we protect. That's why we have confidentiality agreements. And I just think as an
Mm,
industry, we would really be better off if we did that really well. And
amen to that.
if you'd unbutton your coat,
Yeah.
okay? I mean, that to me just drives me nuts, because, when I see a protector all buttoned up, it tells me that either they don't have any gear or they can't get to it,
Good point.
and both are bad.
Yeah, that's a great point, James, that you bring up because hey, you have social media, you have Facebook, you have LinkedIn, you got Twitter, and everything else. And it's kind of a recipe for disaster, especially if you're working and you sign non-disclosure agreement, non-compete agreements. Now, I see the younger guys, on the red carpets, selfies, and I see it every other probably day on especially Facebook. People I know, and I don't know if they don't care or they're trying to get the work out there. I am working. Look at me. But like you said, it's a big no no in our industry, and a lot of
Yeah.
people have done it.
Well, we just don't do ourselves any favors.
Yeah,
We really don't. Now, I understand guys need to make a living, but if they're doing good work, they'll make a living, and the word will spread.
yeah,
It will. They don't need to take selfies with stars to get work. They'll get the work if they're good. It'll come. You know.
yeah. I think it's just a learning experience from the younger guys coming in the business, and you see your girlfriends doing duck lips and dinner pictures or whatever they do. It's like, and then and maybe it's a cool factor. I don't know, but yeah, that's a great point you're bringing up, James. And we definitely, as protectors in the industry, we need to raise the standard in what we're doing, and our professionalism and how we treat our clients. Because trust me, the clients are out there; they're scrubbing social media with their chief of staff and managers, and they're trying to figure out who you are, and they start seeing that likelihood of you getting no offer for employment is pretty high if they start seeing that stuff.
That's right. Yeah, and that's the other thing is that these folks that hire us they're discerning people. They know quality. They understand, what professionalism is, what it looks like, and they don't suffer fools, as my mother and my grandmother always told me. They just don't. And that's the other thing. This isn't the government. They will fire you tomorrow.
Absolutely.
And see you. I mean, and it's nothing personal, but good luck.
There's no union
S
protection in the EP industry.
No, sir. No. So, anyway,
Well, thanks for your time, James. I know your time is valuable right now, and we're gonna call this a wrap. And
alright,
love to have you on again on different topics down the road. 'Cause
excellent.
I'm sure things are gonna be changing, but thanks again for your time, and be safe out there and stay well.
Thank you. Thanks, Mark, for all you're doing. I appreciate you.
Yeah, you too, sir.